Old men are worthless. Couldn't Est even sell his art under his own name. Pathetic. That's how it started. The knife across the dinner table. My daughter-in-law Sienna said it with a laugh, as if I wasn't sitting 3 feet away, as if my son, her husband Evan, wasn't chewing in silence beside her. She thought she was making a clever remark about failed artists she saw online, not realizing she was stabbing directly into the secret I'd carried for 30 years. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I want you to hear this whole story because it's not just about revenge. It's about reclaiming dignity when the people closest to you try to bury it alive. The oven timer dinged just then. Sharp, metallic, like it was confirming the insult. The roast chicken smell filled the room, but I couldn't taste a thing. Evan kept scrolling through his phone, pretending not to hear. My knuckles whitened around my fork. On the counter behind her, a sheet of paper was pinned under a salt shaker. A $2,860 roof repair estimate. Sienna had waved it at me earlier in the week, as though it were proof of my inadequacy. "We can't live in a house falling apart, Noah," she'd said, emphasizing my name like it was something to scold. "You can't even keep up with basic maintenance. We'll have to modernize," Evan agrees. And now, in the same breath as mocking worthless old men, she praised her idol Hale Bradford, the very painter she claimed had redefined twilight on canvas. She didn't know that the man she idolized online, the man whose brushstrokes she dissected on her blog, was me. I had painted under that pseudonym for decades, and I had hidden it even from my family. Her voice carried like theater. "You settle see. Thanksgiving is the perfect time for the reveal. Hale Bradford deserves his moment, unlike those washed-up hacks who never sold a thing." It was meant to sting, and it did. Not just because of the words, but because of what they implied, that I was already dead to her, that my years of work, my grief, my surviving after burying my wife 3 winters ago, meant nothing. From across the table, I caught Evan's lips move, almost too low to hear. "See, just let it go." A whisper, quick as a flicker of doubt, before he dropped his eyes back to his phone. He didn't defend me, but he didn't echo her either. That hesitation lodged in my chest. Sienna's words that night carved something open in me. Not just anger, but memory. I thought of 1996, when I first signed H. Bradford instead of Noah on the corner of a canvas. I thought of the cedar box in my closet, where I kept contracts, receipts, and dried tubes of paint like bones of my past life. And I thought of Evan, my only son, sitting there in silence, letting his wife slice me apart. The table felt colder than October should. Outside, the maples in Albany shed their leaves, blood red and orange. Inside, my family shed its skin in front of me. Sienna leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine. Imagine having nothing to show for a lifetime. Just scraps, old brushes, no legacy. Tragic, really. I wanted to stand, to tell her that every gallery that hung a Bradford had been mine, that the piece she once stood in front of at the Whitney, crying, had been painted in the same cottage where she now sipped her Chardonnay and rolled her eyes at me. But instead, I swallowed it. Because when someone underestimates you that deeply, it's not the moment to explode, it's the moment to begin taking notes. That night, after they went to bed, I cleared the dishes alone. I folded the roof estimate into thirds and slid it into my drawer. I underlined the date in red pen. October 28th. Evidence has to start somewhere, and this would be the first line in a ledger that would grow thicker with every passing day. Evan's silence cut deeper than her words. He had grown up watching me paint, watching his mother frame my canvases with her careful hands. And now he let his wife spit on both of us. His phone glow reflected in his eyes, but he didn't meet mine. When I locked up that night, the cottage creaked like it was tired of holding secrets. I stared at the deadbolt, at the scratched brass knob. I thought if they want to erase me, they'll have to break more than locks. I sat at my old desk, opened the cedar box, and ran my fingers across the dried paint tubes. One of them was cadmium red, bought in 1996 for $3.49. The label was cracked, the cap rusted. I hadn't used it in decades. Its body was stiff, almost brittle, but when I squeezed, I knew inside the color was still alive. And so was I. Sienna thought she was mocking nameless old men, but she was wrong. She had mocked Hale Bradford, the painter she worshipped. She had mocked Noah, the man she married into this family to control. And she had mocked the wrong one, because I had nothing left to lose but my dignity, and that I would reclaim. That was the night the ledger began. That was the night I stopped being just a widower in a creaking cottage and started becoming the witness, the recorder, the one who would turn her own words into evidence. Because betrayal doesn't end at the insult. It begins there. Grief makes walls breathe. At least that's how it felt inside my cottage after Sienna's insult. Every corner carried echoes of the past. Every stair groaned like it remembered a weight that wasn't there anymore. On November 1st, I found a crisp white envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, staged perfectly in view of Sienna's phone camera. HOA dues $462, slapped down like another piece of evidence against me. She filmed it with a cheerful tone. Adulting never ends, guys. Some people just can't keep up. Her followers would never know she was mocking me under my own roof. The cottage wasn't just a house. It was where my wife and I had built a life. The oak beams still smelled faintly of linseed oil from the years she helped stretch my canvases. Now it felt like a mausoleum, and Sienna treated it like a stage. Evan parroted her lines sometimes, almost mechanically. "We should modernize, Dad. Open the space, maybe knock through the studio." But then his eyes flickered, just for a second, as if he wanted to unsay it. That hesitation reminded me of his whisper at the dinner table. He wanted to defend me, but swallowed it. His silence was its own betrayal, but I caught the faint signal of a son torn between two loyalties. I moved through the rooms like a man trespassing in his own home. Sienna had rearranged the mantel, my wife's photo pushed to the edge, replaced by her soy candles and minimalist vases. Even the living room clock ticked differently now, harsher. That night I went into the studio. Dust clung to everything, motes swimming in the slant of the desk lamp. On the shelf, half buried, I found a tube of paint cadmium red, bought in 1996 for $3.49. The paper label was browned, its edges frayed. When I picked it up, I nearly threw it into the trash. Because in that moment, I believed Sienna's voice. I felt like a relic, just another useless object taking up space. A dried-out tube that had no place in this modern house she wanted. My hand hovered over the bin, but then something stopped me. A thought, sharp and stubborn. If I throw this out, I admit she's right. I admit I'm worthless. I placed it back on the shelf, gently. The tube stayed, and so did I. The ghosts of this house whispered louder in the days that followed. I saw them in the corner of the studio where my wife used to hum as she brushed dust off a fresh canvas. I heard them in the kitchen when the kettle whistled at the same pitch she once called my name. And I began to notice the staging more clearly. Sienna filmed short clips almost daily, little life hacks with props she borrowed from my life. She'd set up the camera near the stack of unpaid bills she left deliberately on the counter. She even filmed Evan signing a check, narrating, "Sometimes you just have to take charge when others can't." But Evan stumbled over his words mid-sentence, glanced at me, and looked away. That flicker again, that seed of doubt she hadn't yet crushed. On November 3rd, I wrote a date in the back of my leather notebook, November 10th, Trust Amendment. It was Lydia, my sister, who first mentioned it over the phone. She had sensed my voice cracking when I described Sienna's behavior. "Don't let her box you out of your own life, Noah," she said firmly. "We'll put safeguards in place." It wasn't just the house full of ghosts anymore. It was becoming a house of traps. Every misplaced bill, every staged expense was ammunition for Sienna. But I wasn't the same man who sat silent at the dinner table. I was listening. I was documenting. That cadmium red tube kept me grounded. Whenever doubt crept in, I'd hold it in my palm, feel its brittle body. Inside, the pigment was still alive, just waiting for the right pressure, the right release. And so was I. By November 5th, I had mapped the cottage in my head, not just its rooms, but its layers of history. The chair my wife once sat in while stitching hems now stood against the wall like furniture in exile. The cedar box with my contracts was still in the closet, its lock stiff but intact. Every ghost reminded me what was at stake. Sienna thought she was building a case against me, but she didn't understand. I was building one against her. I didn't sleep much after the envelope stunt. On November 5th, a Tuesday, Lydia drove down from Saratoga in her gray Subaru, the one that still smells faintly of peppermint from the mints she hoards in the console. We met at Rosen and Wilkes on Lark Street in Albany, fifth floor conference room, with a window that looks over the brickbacks of row houses and a sliver of the park. Lydia hugged me longer than usual and said, "We're not waiting for another shoe to drop. We're putting shoes in a safe." Miss Wilkes, short, brisk, the kind of attorney who speaks in verbs, listened while I explained the shape of Sienna's insults and the way Evan's silence echoed after them. When I finished, she slid a legal pad toward me. "Your trust allows an amendment," she said. "We'll tighten beneficiary language, vest the studio and the cottage as protected property, and specify a successor trustee in case of incapacity. Originals get locked. Certified copies go to those you trust. You'll also grant a narrow power of attorney to Lydia for emergencies, revocable any time." I watched the tip of her pen notch each point like stitches. The word protected steadied me. "We set it for November 10th, 2:30 p.m. Bring ID, your existing trust binder, and the property schedule," she said. "We sell notarize here. If someone is trying to push you out of your own life, paper is the anchor. Paper is the anchor." I wrote that in my leather notebook under the date. Lydia squeezed my shoulder. "After we sign, I set driving with you to the bank. Originals don't as set live in a cottage where someone sets filming set life hacks. Does live in a vault." On the walk back to the car, I called Ray Ortiz at Mohawk Valley Credit Union. Ray's been my branch guy for years, knows my coffee order, knows the span of quiet after my wife died. I kept it simple. "Ray, I need alerts on every account. Real time on wires, ACH transfers, Zelle, anything over $500. He didn't ask gossip. Done. I sell set thresholds at $1 for test pings too. If anyone links an external, you still get a push and a call. It'll flag your profile. Speak to account holder only." "Put a note," I said. "If a woman named Sienna tries to pet help, Sifshi's not on anything." He exhaled softly. "Got it, Noah." I said, email confirmation. By that evening, the confirmation sat in my inbox with a timestamp November 5th, 6:14 p.m. I printed it and slid it into the cedar box. Back at the cottage, Sienna had rearranged the entry table. Again, a new ceramic tray for keys. Her lip gloss placed dead center like a planted flag. She glanced up when I came in. "We need to finalize the refinance, Noah," she said lightly, as if she were offering me tea. "Rates won't stay low forever." "Nothing's final until it's in my handwriting," I said, and kept walking. On November 9th, a Saturday, I replaced the deadbolt. I chose a simple satin nickel set from the hardware store on Delaware Avenue, $129.18 after tax. I kept the receipt. On the back, with my red pen, I wrote the new code and the time I set it. Code 1031, set 2:07 p.m. I logged it in my notebook. Schlage keypad installed. Old keys retired. Evan texted new code. "Sienna not included. I'm not cruel. I'm careful. If you're going to accuse me of being helpless, I'll show you what preparedness looks like, line by line." That night, the cottage was quiet enough to hear the old radiators hiss. I sat on the studio stool, the cadmium red tube in my palm like a talisman. $3.49 printed in tiny, stubborn numbers. I thought of my wife's voice, "Secure what is yours, Noah, then paint." I placed the tube back on the shelf and closed the door. November 10th, 2:30 p.m. We signed. The conference room smelled of toner and lemon cleaner. Miss Wilkes read each clause aloud, methodical. I initialed and signed where the yellow flags told me to. The notary, Clara Keene, stamped the bottom right corner, her seal pressing into the paper with a satisfying indent. Lydia signed as successor trustee. We paginated, tabbed, and created a property schedule that listed the cottage, the studio's contents by category, and in cautious language, artistic works created under pseudonym Hale Bradford, provenance and catalog on file. "Careful wording," Miss Wilkes said, but tight. You control disclosure. You decide when and how anyone learns what. We left with a stack, originals in a red rope folder, certified copies in a manila envelope. Lydia drove, and at 3:25 p.m., we walked into the credit union. Ray met us at the safe deposit desk, handed me a small brass key, and watched while I slid the originals into a box. He logged the entry with date time November 10th. 3:42 p.m. I kept the receipt. I felt something in my chest settle, like a book finally returning to its shelf. On the way home, Lydia stopped at a deli. She made me eat half a turkey sandwich and said, "You need protein to fight." "Is this a war?" I asked. "It sets a boundary," she said. "But boundaries feel like war to people who benefit from you not having any." That night, I texted Evan the new door code and wrote, "Use this and this only. Do not share." He texted back a thumbs up and nothing else. A son building a bridge too slowly over a flood. 2 days later, November 12th, 11:43 p.m. The Nest Cam sent a motion alert. Person detected. Studio. I didn't leap out of bed. I watched from my phone in the dark. Sienna, in a black windbreaker, moved like a shadow through my studio. In her right hand, a thin cardboard art tube. She scanned the shelves, paused at the cedar box's empty spot. I'd moved the originals and then drifted to the stacked canvases. She didn't take anything. She placed the tube behind a rolled drop cloth and left. I saved the clip to my iCloud and wrote in the ledger, November 12th, 11:43 p.m. Sienna enters studio with thin tube. No removal, tube concealed behind drop cloth. I didn't touch it. A trap you spring too soon is a lesson you don't learn twice. I wanted her assumption to ripen until it became evidence she hung herself with. The next morning, I made coffee and let the house act normal. Sienna breezed in and out, narrating a story to her phone about new beginnings. Evan kissed my cheek on his way to work and avoided my eyes. Smile, routine, denial, the family choreography of people who want a roof without facing the storm forming under it. Lydia called. We set her good on the legal front. Next up, provenance. If she tries to move anything art-related, galleries will require pedigree. You will not hand her the rope. Marla Boone at Chatham Gallery knows the Bradford line, I said. I said I'll call her quietly. Good, Lydia said. We set her fortifying every door she thinks is ajar. The days slid into a watchful rhythm. I wrote dates and amounts. I kept receipts. I learned the house's night sound, so any new sound glowed like a lighthouse. My wife used to say, a frame is what tells the eye where to look. This was framing too. Only now the picture was a plan. I left the art tube where she tucked it. I left the blue tape marks she'd started sneaking onto the floor for camera angles. I left her performance unedited because sometimes you let people build their stage until the only thing left is your cue. And I planned for November 19th. That would be a pivot point. I wrote it in ink. Photograph appraiser's card. When it would come, I didn't know yet. But the date mattered. The ledger needed that line. Clean and unarguable. When you're turning secrets into shields, you don't swing wildly. You document. You wait. You move when the paper says move. By then I had stopped arguing with Sienna in my head. I had stopped imagining clever speeches that changed her. I wasn't painting her a new version of me. I was building a record of her. And records don't flinch. November 15th arrived with a gray sky stretched over Albany, the kind that makes the Hudson look like steel. I boarded the 8:42 a.m. train into the city with my leather notebook and a plain envelope tucked under my coat. Across from me, commuters scrolled their phones. I stared at the reflection in the window, my own face looking back, lined with years of work hidden in plain sight. At 10:17 a.m., my phone buzzed Marla Boone. She was the gallery director in Chatham who had handled the Bradford piece back in 2007. Calm, precise. A woman who spoke about art like a surgeon about anatomy. Her voice was low. Niwa, I've checked the provenance records. Every Bradford piece you consigned is catalogued under pseudonym, confidential but traceable. If anyone tries to place a work without paperwork, galleries will hit a wall. I've already set alerts with the Soho registry. You're covered. Because Thank you, I said. Marla paused. If someone is circling your work without pedigree, they settle trip alarms before they ever get to market. Yusuf got armor. I wrote the date and her name in the ledger, November 15th. Marla confirms provenance system intact. Gallery alerts set November 16th. Armor. Yes, that was the word. On the train ride back, I opened my notebook and began sketching the Thanksgiving seating chart. Not art, not shading, just blocks. Rectangles for chairs, circles for plates. I wrote names at each spot. Sienna across from me because confrontation has to sit at eye level. Evan beside her, his silence in reach. Lydia at my right, anchor and witness. The empty head of the table. My wife's old spot left vacant, a ghost in attendance. I folded the sketch into the ledger. A plan doesn't start with speeches. It starts with where the eyes will fall when the truth lands. Back at the cottage, Sienna had been busy. Blue painter's tape framed corners of my studio, little squares on the floor, marks above the shelves. She was staging her shots, setting up camera angles like she owned the space. I didn't rip them up. I photographed them, evidence. The photos auto-uploaded with a timestamp, November 15th, 4:52 p.m. In the kitchen, the refrigerator door had become her bulletin board. She'd stuck magnets on top of bills, grocery lists, her yoga class flyers. I tacked something of my own beneath her favorite ceramic cat magnet. The latest roof estimate, $3,190, dated October 30th. I wanted it visible. I wanted her to see what I let stay in plain sight. That estimate wasn't just a bill, it was a prop. And props tell stories. Every receipt I kept wasn't clutter. It was armor. And armor doesn't just protect, it gleams. Late that night, I sat at my desk and opened the cedar box. Inside were contracts, receipts, old letters, and the trust copies Lydia had insisted I keep on site, certified, and signed. I slid the gallery email printouts beside them, tucked the roof estimates, the deadbolt receipt, the bank alert confirmation. Then I wrote on the first page of the notebook, the ledger. Every word she speaks against me will have a counterweight. Every expense she waves in my face will have context. Every whisper will be matched with paper. That's when I realized I didn't need to outshout her. I only needed to outdocument her. On November 16th, Marla emailed a follow-up. Registry alerts confirmed. Any consignment attempt will trigger verification. I printed it, logged the date. By then, the rhythm of my life had changed. Morning coffee came with ledger updates. Afternoon walks ended at the filing cabinet. The cottage's ghosts had shifted. They no longer whispered only of grief. They whispered strategy. Sienna noticed, of course. She commented while pouring herself wine. You've been spending a lot of time in that dusty office. Planning your big comeback. I smiled. Something like that. She thought it was sarcasm. She thought old men don't come back. That evening she staged another video. She walked through the studio holding a candle, narrating about manifesting abundance. I watched from the doorway, unseen. Her phone light caught the roof estimate magnet on the fridge. She paused, tilted her head, then moved on. She thought it was nothing. But nothing is where truth hides best. On November 18th, I caught her whispering into her phone by the back door. We settle have it by Thanksgiving. Don't settle worry, the appraisal will check out. He settle never know what settle is missing. She hung up quick when I entered, plastered on a smile. Oh hey, just confirming yoga. Yoga sip's expensive these days, I said. Her smile tightened. She left the room. I wrote it down, November 18th, approx. 7:30 p.m. Overheard Sienna. We sell have it by Thanksgiving. Appraisal will check out. The ledger grew heavier with each page. Heavier but steadier. Sometimes, in the quiet, I would think about the pen name itself. Hale Bradford. The irony wasn't lost on me. Hale, a word for strength. Bradford, a borrowed surname from a forgotten neighbor I once admired. Together they had become my shield, my disguise. And now both names, Noah and Bradford, were mine to wield. That night, I sketched again. Not a painting, an outline of the binder I would place on the Thanksgiving table. Sections labeled receipts, estimates, trust papers, appraisals, bank alerts, each tab a nail, each page a plank. A coffin built not for me, but for her lies. I didn't sleep easily, but when I did, I dreamed of the cedar box glowing like a lantern in the dark. Paper as fire, paper as light. November 18th began with a call from Ray at the credit union. His tone was clipped the way bankers sound when they're reading from a screen and don't want to alarm you. Noah, he said, we just blocked a wire attempt. $22,750. Outbound, flagged under Sienna LLC. We froze it immediately. I gripped the phone tighter. From which account? Yours. Checking. She tried to initiate through online banking. Same IP as your cottage. We caught it before it cleared. I swallowed hard. Send me the record. An email landed within minutes. Transaction ID. Attempt timestamp November 18th, 9:42 a.m. Destination account blanked by the freeze. I printed it and slid it into the ledger. Evidence doesn't blink. By midday, Marla Boone confirmed what Ray Sipps's alert had suggested. Noah, she approached a Soho gallery yesterday, tried to consign a Bradford, claimed it came from the family estate. They asked for provenance. She had nothing. She was rejected on the spot. Marla Sipp's voice hardened. This isn't sept dabbling. This is attempted fraud. Keep your records tight. Fraud. The word rang like a bell in my chest. On November 19th, the appraiser came. His name was Thomas Heller. Mid-40s, wore a navy blazer and carried a black case. He walked the studio with quiet reverence, fingers never touching canvases, eyes scanning frames like a man reading Braille with his sight. He handed me his card, heavy stock, embossed letters, Thomas Heller Appraisal Services, Hudson Valley. He left after 20 minutes, promising his written report by early December. I logged it, November 19th. Heller appraisal visit, card received, originals secured, certified trust copies presented. That evening, the house cracked open. Sienna cornered me in the kitchen, phone still warm in her palm. The refinance was basically done. She hissed. Why are you stalling everything? You don't to even understand half these documents. I let her vent. Let her lean closer, her perfume too sweet, her voice pitched for intimidation. Then I let my thumb brush the record button on my iPhone, screen down on the counter. Her words flowed straight into the microphone. You set her dragging us all down, she said. Evan deserves better. I deserve better. You set her a liability, Noah. You should be grateful we set her trying to salvage this place. When she stormed out, the recording was safe in my pocket. Another nail for the binder, but it wasn't enough to collect evidence. I had to set a mirror in place. Late that night, I returned to the studio. I pulled the art tube from behind the drop cloth where Sienna had hidden it. Thin cardboard weighty enough to carry a single canvas inside one of my twilight studies. A smaller Bradford, unsigned but mine brushstrokes, unmistakable. I stared at it under the desk lamp. She had planned to sneak it out, consign it, spin it into quick money. But she had failed once already, and she'd try again. So I made a decision. From a locked drawer, I retrieved a student imitation canvas I'd bought years ago at a flea market. Similar palette, cheap frame, no signature, close enough to pass for a treasure in dim light, but worthless under scrutiny. I slid the imitation into her tube, sealed the cap, and returned it exactly where she'd hidden it. This wasn't theft. It wasn't sabotage. It was reflection. If she wanted to gamble her credibility on stolen work, she'd be gambling with counterfeit. I wrote in the ledger, November 19th, tube swapped. Genuine canvas secured in cedar box. Student copy placed in tube, no damage inflicted. Mirror set. The act steadied me more than I expected. Revenge isn't fury, it's precision. The next morning she noticed my calm. She slammed a cupboard door louder than necessary, muttered something about control freaks. But she didn't check the tube. Not yet. On November 20th, Evan lingered by the back door before leaving for work. His hand brushed the doorknob twice, like he wanted to say something. Finally, he muttered, She-Sep's pushing too hard, Dad. Just be careful. It wasn't a confession. Not yet. But it was the first crack in his silence. I nodded. I sat keeping records. He nodded back, eyes wet, and left. That night I stood in the studio again, cadmium red tube in my hand. The label was nearly gone now, paper peeling at the corners. I could feel the powdery crust inside, dried by years. I squeezed it gently, not empty, not yet, just like me. Sienna thought she was clever, planting cameras, staging receipts, pushing refinances, but she didn't understand the rules of legacy. A man's name isn't erased by Instagram reels or staged vlogs. A man's name is preserved in ink, in receipts, in paint that refuses to dry. The closet door closed with a soft click. Inside, the real canvas rested under cedar and paper. Safe, the fake slept in her tube, waiting for the perfect moment. And I, an old man she called worthless, was building a stage she didn't even realize she was rehearsing on. Thanksgiving was only a week away. The table was already set in my mind. On November 26th, Tuesday before Thanksgiving, the cottage felt like a stage an hour before curtained, quiet, wired, full of marks on the floor where feet were supposed to land. Sienna's blue painter's tape still framed my studio. Two neat right angles on the floor near the easel, a small square above the shelf where the cedar box used to sit. I didn't peel them up. I photographed every piece of tape at 9:11 a.m., then again at 4:03 p.m., and saved both sets to a folder labeled Angles Pre-Show. Evidence doesn't only speak in numbers, sometimes it speaks in rectangles. The morning had already brought paperwork, a push alert from Ray's system. Someone tried to link a new external account ending 79 to my checking at 8:06 a.m. Denied. I logged it, printed the alert email, and slid it behind the frozen wire attempt from the 18th. The ledger was no longer a notebook. It had become a spine. Sienna drifted through the studio around 10:30 a.m., with a tape measure and a soft voice meant for her followers. Lighting check for Thursday, she murmured, "We're manifesting abundance." The phone in her hand traced slow arcs. The blue tape caught the lens and flashed like signals. She didn't touch the thin cardboard tube she'd hidden earlier. She didn't need to. Confidence makes thieves lazy. The student imitation canvas slept in there. The real piece safe under cedar. I wrote one line, November 26th, tape verified, no movement of tube. At lunch I found Evan on the back steps tying his shoes for work. November light lay flat across the yard. The maples had given up the last of their leaves, and the Hudson air smelled like iron. He stared at the laces a long time before speaking. "Dad," he said, voice tight. "She's planning something big for Thanksgiving." He swallowed. "She wants a live stream reveal. Guests, comments, donations turned on. She thinks if she shows your mess and then shows a real Bradford she can, I don't know, kick you into selling the house, prove she's the one who saved this family." The word saved snagged something inside me. My wife once said saving often begins with silence, not spectacle. "What did you say?" I asked. Evan Sett's eyes lifted, ashamed and pleading at once. I told her not to. I told her art stuff needs paperwork. That galleries, that provenance is real. She said I set been infected by your scarcity mindset. She said Thursday is setam make or break content. Setam, he exhaled. "Dad, I setam sorry." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be sorry. You have to be sure." He bit down on a smile that was almost a grimace. "I am getting there." "And when the door opens Thursday," I said, "stand on the side of the person who signs the deed." He nodded once, a soldier saluting the truth. Then he went to work. All afternoon I paced the studio deliberately, letting the house memorize my footsteps. The Nest camera chimed twice with activity in living room when deliveries came. At 2:18 p.m., Mrs. Donnelly from Honest Hearth Bakery dropped off 2 pies, pumpkin and apple, each receipt handwritten on a floral pad. I filed the slip with the previous October 30th. November 2nd deliveries she kept in her little notebook. People like Mrs. Donnelly are the quiet saints of a ledger. They write what happened and when, and they don't need applause to keep doing it. By 5:40 p.m., the river light had gone slate, and my studio lamp pooled gold across the work table. I picked up the cadmium red tube, the same one from 1996. Tag still whispering $3.49 under scabs of dust and time. I turned it in my hand, my thumb finding the softest place on the brittle metal. You were never worthless, I said to the empty room, and I meant the tube and I meant myself. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I squeezed hard. The tube bent, the seam creaked, and for a heartbeat I saw the past trying to splinter under pressure. I stopped. I didn't crush it. I set it back on the shelf, careful, as if it could feel the dignity I was restoring. Power isn't in breaking what's fragile. It's in choosing not to. Around 7 p.m. Sienna called from the hallway, voice bright and public-facing. Quick update, guys. Big Thanksgiving surprise coming. Some people let life pass them by. Not me. She shot a glance into the studio and smirked. We're gonna do something unforgettable. I thought, we are. She left to run an errand, the phrase that tries to sound harmless when it means scheming. I checked the tube one last time, untouched, and locked the studio with a quiet click. The new Schlag keypad blinked a soft green when I set code 1031 tonight. On the kitchen table, my binder weighted tabs labeled receipts, estimates, trust papers, appraisals, bank alerts. Every plastic sleeve had weight. Every page had a finger smudge of labor. I added 2 things: the November 26th external link denial and the blue tape photo contact sheet I'd printed on my old Epson. At 8:12 p.m. Evan came home. He hovered by the threshold like a boy asking for permission. He already had. "What do you need me to do Thursday?" he asked. "Sit at her side," I said. "And when I say thay housekeeping, sit, put the binder in front of her. Don't tet argue. Just slide it across." He stared at the binder a long time. "She wanted sit take this well." "She doesn't have to," I said. "Paper doesn't tet care if you take it well. It just stays true." He let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Okay." We stood in the kitchen while the radiator hissed and the pies breathed cinnamon. My wife's photo on the mantel caught a thread of lamplight and seemed, for a second, to recognize the room again. "Dad," Evan said. "Yes. If she melts down." "She will," I said gently. He nodded, absorbing it like weather. "Then I still stay on the deed suppa's side." "Good," I said. "That sips the family side." Later, when the house slept, I walked the perimeter the way my father used to do on winter nights, hand on each window latch, palm to the deadbolt, ear tuned to the settling wood. I paused in the studio doorway and let my eyes adjust, until I could make out the blue tape squares like constellations no astronomer would claim. In their angles I saw the whole week: the insult, the ledger, the trust papers, the tube, the sun breaking his silence. Thanksgiving would bring witnesses. Yes, Lydia Marla, Mrs. Donnelly, with her notebook. But that wasn't the point. The point was that truth had mass now. It could be placed on a table and pushed across wood grain toward a camera that didn't know how to lie for long. Before bed, I opened the cedar box and thumbed the appraiser's card. Thomas Heller, Hudson Valley. Then the bank freeze printout, then the deadbolt receipt, $129.18, with code 1031 scrawled on the back. I closed the lid and felt the click run up my arm like a small, precise thunder. When I finally lay down, the cottage exhaled with me. I thought of the tube on the shelf and understood why I hadn't crushed it. You don't win by proving you can destroy. You win by proving you never had to. Outside, the Hudson held the moon like a coin you keep for bus fare you no longer need. Inside, the blue angles waited, and I slept. Thanksgiving arrived sharp and brittle. The Hudson air carried frost, the kind that stiffens leaves into glass before the sun has a chance to melt them. Inside the cottage, candles flickered across the dining table, set not just with plates but with positions. Every seat was deliberate. Sienna opposite me, Evan beside her, Lydia at my right. The head of the table, my wife's old place, remained empty, a chair-shaped ghost presiding. Sienna buzzed with a hostess's false glow. Her phone leaned against a candlestick, angled at the table. Live stream already counting down with a digital ticker. "Big reveal," she whispered to her unseen audience. Her lipstick shone dark red, her earrings caught every flicker of the flame. She thought she was about to crown herself queen. I tapped my phone, hidden in plain sight beside the butter plate, recording on candles, chatter, receipts, all captured. Evan glanced at me once. Quick as lightning. I nodded. He swallowed hard. He knew his cue. Sienna raised her glass. Before we eat, she said brightly, I have something special for everyone tonight. A story about value, about wasted potential, and about what it means to... Housekeeping first, I interrupted, my voice steady. She blinked. Excuse me. I slid the binder onto the table, leather cover cool under my palm. Before stories, we deal with facts. Evan reached across, his hand trembling only slightly, and pushed the binder toward her. Read it, he said, his voice quiet but firm. The first time in months he'd chosen my side aloud. Sienna laughed nervously. What is this, Noah? Your scrapbook? Lydia leaned in, her silver hair catching candlelight. Certified Trust Amendment. November 10th, 2:30 p.m. Rosen and Wilkes. Originals in the bank. Copies here, she tapped the first tab. The cottage, the studio, the works under Hale Bradford, protected. Sienna's face twitched. She flipped to the next section. Roof estimates. HOA receipts. The $2,860 and $3,190 sheets. She had once waved at me. Her own handwriting highlighted in red pen, annotated with dates. Receipts don't lie, I said. She turned the page again. Bank alerts from Ray Ortiz, each one time-stamped. November 18th, 9:42 a.m. wire attempt, $22,750. Blocked. November 26th, 8:06 a.m. external account link attempt, denied. Her cheeks flushed crimson. This is twisted. You stir spying on me. No, I said calmly. I set in recording reality. From the sideboard, Marla Boone stepped forward, pulling a slim folder from her bag. She'd arrived earlier under the guise of dropping off dessert. Now she laid down gallery letters, provenance logs, rejection slips. On November 17th, Miss Sienna attempted to consign a Bradford in Soho, claimed it was from a family estate. She was asked for provenance. She had none, rejected. Marla's voice was sharp enough to slice pie. Sienna's laugh cracked. You set me up. This is entrapment. No, I said again. This is a mirror. She lunged for the cardboard tube by the wall, snatched it up like a prize. Here, she cried to her phone. Here sips the proof he sips hiding. A real Bradford stolen from this family by a bitter old man. She unfurled the canvas, arms shaking with triumph. The imitation spread across the table under candlelight, muddy hues, a student's clumsy twilight, no signature. Her livestream chat exploded in scrolling disbelief. Fake, fake, fake. Her mouth fell open. No, this isn't set. I rose slowly, walked to the closet, pulled out a wrapped canvas and carried it to the table like communion. A Hudson twilight, real brushstrokes shimmering under Marla's inspection light. She misted the corner, and the monogram H. Bradford glowed faint but undeniable. Gasps circled the table. Lydia covered her mouth. Evan stared as if seeing his father for the first time. I turned to Sienna. Old men build the tables you eat at. Old men paint the skies you worship online. Old men document while you live stream. Her chat feed spiraled out of control, liar, scammer, fraud. Hearts and angry faces collided across her phone screen. She fumbled, tried to angle the camera away, but the binder, the receipts, the real canvas, all filled the frame. And then the final nail. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Donnelly, honest hearth apron dusted with flour, stepped inside holding her notebook. Mr. Noah, you asked for dates. She flipped to pages marked October 30th, November 2nd, her handwriting steady. Pie deliveries. I logged every one. Saw Miss Sienna leaving studio late on November 12th. Black jacket, carrying a tube. The cottage went silent except for the crackle of candle flames. Sienna's hand shook so violently she dropped her wine glass. Red spread across the tablecloth like spilled blood. I looked at her, not with fury, not with triumph, but with the clarity of a man who had nothing left to hide. You called me worthless. Tonight you called yourself out. Her live stream blinked out as she fumbled to end it. Too late. Screenshots would be everywhere before dessert. Evan pushed the binder closer to her. Look at it, Sienna. All of it. You did this. Her eyes filled with tears. But they weren't set remorse. They were rage, pure and wild. She turned to Evan. You set her choosing him over me. Evan's voice was steady now. I said I'm choosing the truth. For the first time in months, the cottage didn't feel like a house full of ghosts. It felt like a courtroom, a gallery, a reckoning. I placed the cadmium red tube on the table beside the canvas. Its body was still bent, nearly broken, but intact. Like me, and with that I carved the silence with one final line. Thanksgiving is about gratitude. Tonight I said I'm grateful for records. Because records don't sit lie, people do. The morning after Thanksgiving, the cottage smelled of smoke, not from firewood, but from the embers of what Sienna had tried to burn and failed. The tablecloth still bore the stain of spilled wine, red dried to brown like a wound already scabbing. At 9:12 a.m. Ray Ortiz's email arrived, formal notice of blocked wire transfer attached. Cease and desist letter issued. Documentation enclosed. I printed the PDF 4 pages long, signed with bank letterhead, citing the attempted $22,750 transfer on November 18th. Another nail already set before the hammer fell. By noon, Marla called from her office in Chatham. It's SIPs spreading, Noah. Her live stream meltdown. It's SIPs clipped everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, even Reddit. She SIPs trending under D-Bradford fraud. Tess. I could hear typing in the background. The clatter of gallery staff leaning into damage control. She tried to spin it on Instagram this morning. Claimed she was protecting you. That she faked the reveal to expose how cruel families dismiss women with vision. And, I asked. Marla snorted. It backfired. Screenshots of the binder, the receipts, the fake canvas, they supper everywhere. Commenters are dismantling her story in real time. People don't set forget numbers $22,750, $2,860, $3,190. They sepper quoting your ledger back at her. I almost laughed. The irony, she wanted an audience and now she had won the wrong one. By mid-afternoon, Sienna stormed out of the cottage with 2 duffel bags, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Her phone was live again, angled at herself as she dragged luggage down the icy steps. Toxic families hate when you shine brighter, she declared. They can't handle when a woman builds her own empire. But the comments scrolling beneath cut like glass. You tried to steal, not build. Receipts don't lie. You're finished. Evan watched from the porch, silent. His face wasn't gloating, but pale, like someone who's just seen the final act of a play and realized he was cast in it too. Dad, he said quietly. She SIP's not coming back, is she? Not to this house, I answered. The hours blurred after that. Sienna doubled down online, posted a podcast episode titled The Real Story They Won't Tell You. I listened, earbuds in, while sanding an old picture frame in the studio. She spoke in a strained voice about how she had sacrificed for a dying man, how she had tried to bring his art into the world but was shut down by jealous relatives. But every claim she made was met with screenshots in the comments. The blocked wire, the gallery rejection, the appraiser's card, Mrs. Donnelly's notebook. People didn't just doubt her, they dismantled her. By evening, she posted once more, a video filmed from the passenger seat of a car, mascara streaked. I just wanted to help, she sobbed. They made me look crazy. But no one was making her look crazy. She had done that herself. That night, I sat in the studio with Evan. He hadn't spoken much since the dinner. He stared at the genuine Hudson Twilight painting leaning against the wall. She really thought she could erase you, he said finally. She didn't just understand. I told him, erasing someone takes more than lies. It takes silence, and I don't stay silent anymore. He nodded, his eyes red. I should have said something sooner. I let her use me as proof. His voice cracked. I put my hand on his shoulder. You spoke when it mattered. That sep's enough. The house felt lighter then, as if the ghosts had shifted again, less like a mausoleum, more like a gallery returning to order after a storm. By the weekend, Sienna's brand had collapsed. Her partnerships dissolved. Sponsors scrubbed her face from campaigns. A boutique that once sent her free candles posted a terse note. We do not support fraud or exploitation. Contract terminated. Her podcast episodes were pulled down one by one. Each time I wrote the date in the ledger, November 29th, Instagram sponsorship canceled. November 30th, podcast deleted. I wasn't gloating. I was recording history, the way I always had. Evan scrolled through the chaos on his phone, then set it down. She sips trying to rebuild already. New handle, new tagline. Phoenix from the ashes. Let her, I said. Ashes can hold a house. Only paper and truth can. The cadmium red tube sat on the shelf beside me, still dented, still intact. A reminder that pressure reveals, but survival endures. And for the first time in months, I painted, not a twilight, not a landscape, just a single red stroke across canvas, bold and unbroken, a mark that refused to fade. December 12th came cold and bright, the kind of winter morning that makes the Hudson glitter like cut glass. I took the 7:58 a.m. train downriver with a flat package on my lap and a letter in my coat pocket addressed to the Evelyn Hale Scholarship Fund, my wife's name written in my hand. The auction room was in a converted brick warehouse on Water Street, warm with halogen lights and the hum of money in winter coats. Lot 42, the registrar said, sliding me a clipboard. Title. I looked at the painting. Hudson at Blue Hour, and said, Evening North Bank. Under artist, the cataloger wrote H. Bradford verified, then glanced up when I added, Consigned by Noah Hale. She didn't react. The good ones don't. I initialed the reserve $30,000 and watched as the art handler lifted the work to the preview wall. Morla was already there, a quiet sentinel with a folder of provenance. She tapped the printed line that mattered. Provenance, Chatham Gallery files. Estate ledger, consignor's records on file, appraiser card, Heller, November 19th. Paper is a spine. Even in a room like this, you can feel who has one. At 11:06 a.m., the gavel rose. Lot 42, the auctioneer said. The vowels of the city crisp in his voice. A Twilight by H. Bradford. Reserve at 30. His eyes traveled the room like a metronome. 30 I have. 32. 35. 38. 40. The numbers climbed as if they'd been waiting months to do so. At $47,200, the room paused, breath held in a shared greedy prayer. Fair warning, the auctioneer sang. Wood met wood. Sold. The word landed as softly as snow and as finely as a door closing. I didn't cheer. I exhaled. In the settlement room, a clerk slid me a preliminary proceeds statement with the hammer price circled, and the House Commission noted. I endorsed the payout to the scholarship account, line by deliberate line, and handed the letter from my coat to the woman with the calm hands. For the music department at Albany High, I said. She used to fix their frames when budgets fell apart. The clerk read the dedication aloud to students who keep a steady note when life goes off key. She looked up. That sip's lovely. It is true, I said. Before I left, the house manager brought a certificate of authenticity Sept asked me to sign, to accompany the painting's Sep's file. I uncapped their felt tip and wrote carefully one under the other. Noah Hale. Hale Bradford. The ink bled a little into the paper, like two names finally soaking the same page. The manager lifted the certificate to the light and tilted his head. Both are yours, he said. It wasn't a question. Both are mine, I answered. By mid-afternoon I was back in Albany, coat collar up against the wind. The cottage smelled of coffee and lemon oil. Lydia had been through tidying with the reverence of a sister who knows what to touch and what to leave be. On the kitchen table lay an envelope from the auction house, settlement confirmation, and an email printout from the foundation acknowledging receipt. Date stamped December 12th, 2:41 p.m. I slid both into the ledger. Money proves a point. Where it goes proves a life. By 4 p.m., my phone rang. A clipped female voice identified herself. Associate at McKinnon and Tate, Sienna's newly minted counsel. We said reviewed your client Setbis public actions. She began, misnaming me as if I were a case and not a person. Defamation is on the table. You said damaged our client Setbis brand and interfered with business opportunities. I angled the phone away from my ear and looked out at the gray, snow-threat sky. Send it in writing, I said. We will, she sniffed. Expect demands for removal of online content and... The second beep hit my ear. Call waiting. Lydia, I switched lines. Already handled, she said, not bothering with hello. I left them a neat little packet, trust amendment, bank's cease and desist, the gallery's rejection note, your audio from the kitchen, and Mrs. Donnelly's dates. I included a line you'll like, facts are not defamatory. Their email went silent 15 minutes ago. I smiled despite myself. You always did like a clean table. Thanksgiving sup's over, she said. Now we do dishes? Evening fell early. Albany does that in December, turns off the color and asks you to find your own. I put on my coat and walked 2 blocks to the Red Spoon Diner, a warm stainless steel arc in a sea of cold. Evan was already in a booth, his hands around a mug he didn't seem to be drinking. He slid a single sheet of paper across the Formica. Hudson Valley Community College. Non-credit registration confirmation. The course, picture framing A, start date. January 8th, fee $226. Paid. He didn't meet my eyes. I could say I syspem doing this for you, he said, but I think I syspem doing it to learn how to hold things right, paintings. People, myself. The sentence cracked something soft in my chest. I looked at the paper as if it were a relic. Then I looked at my son. Good, I said. Do it for you, and if you want hours in the studio, you still have them. He nodded, blinking too fast. A server slid a slip beneath our water glasses. I wrote the tip too heavy and saved the receipt. $18.62. December 12th, 6:37 p.m. Booth 4. Because some papers are small but hold oceans. On our way out, Evan stopped at the door. Dad, he said, does it feel lighter? I thought about the certificate with 2 names, the auctioneer's gavel, the scholarship letter, Lydia's packet landing like a verdict. I thought about the cadmium red tube on my shelf, bent but capped. I thought about the ledger, fat with dates that could stand up in any weather. It feels exact, I said. Exact is lighter than lies. When we got home, the cottage greeted us without judgment. I opened the cedar box and slid the diner receipt behind the foundation acknowledgement like a bookmark between chapters. In the studio, I turned on the lamp and watched dust drift in a small, private snowfall. Evan stood beside me, hands in his coat pockets, reading the labels on my frame clamps like a tourist in a foreign city learning the street names. Tomorrow, I said, we'll cut mat board. Tomorrow, he echoed, and it wasn't a promise made to me, it was one made to himself. That night, before sleep and without ceremony, I recorded a note on my phone. Certificate signed. Both names true. Proceeds to Evelyn's scholarship. Counsel rattled and quieted. Evan enrolled. I saved it into the folder marked Ledger. Voice. Because paper speaks. But voices matter too. I turned off the light. The cottage exhaled. Across the room, the cadmium red tube caught the street lamp's slice and flickered. Not bright, but unmistakably alive. Winter settled hard over Albany, the kind that makes every window seam whistle and every floorboard groan like a violin string pulled too tight. But inside the cottage the air felt different, lighter, steadier, like the house itself had decided to keep breathing with me. The deadbolt clicked each night with a sound I'd come to cherish. Not fear, not paranoia, just peace. Every turn of the key was a line in the story that ended with me still standing. Code 1031 blinked green, my quiet confirmation. Boundaries weren't bars, they were proof of belonging. In the studio, the ghosts no longer pressed so heavy. Evan worked beside me now, sanding frame rails with a care that was almost reverent. His hands, once glued to a phone screen, were coated in sawdust and oil. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was about bevels, miters, grain patterns. Not apologies, not excuses, just the craft of holding art steady. His redemption wasn't words, it was wood shavings. Sometimes I'd glance at him, shoulders hunched in concentration, and remember him as a boy tracing my brushstrokes with a finger in the air. Now he traced grooves into maple and oak, building structures for what needed preserving. It was enough. On December 22nd, the appraiser's official report arrived in the mail. Thomas Heller's signature crisp at the bottom. The Bradford Twilight was valued at $52,000 market, $47,200 realized at sale. I logged it in the ledger, then slid the report behind the settlement, acknowledgement, and foundation receipt. A neat stack. Exact. After filing it, I opened the cedar box. The document sat inside like a choir, voices aligned, each date and dollar harmonizing. On top lay the object that had followed me through every act of this storm. The cadmium red tube bought in 1996 for $3.49, dented, label browned, cap rusted. I lifted it gently. Weeks earlier, I had nearly crushed it. On Thanksgiving, I'd placed it on the table as if daring it to break under history. Now, in the quiet of winter, I held it differently. My thumb traced its seams, but there was no urge to squeeze. The tube wasn't proof of my fragility. It was proof of my endurance. Inside, pigment still waited, stubborn against time. I didn't throw it out. I didn't crush it. I did something simpler. I capped it carefully, twisting until the threads clicked home. Sealed, preserved. Not because I needed the paint, but because I needed the reminder. Some things don't dry, not if you tend them. That night, I set up my phone and recorded one last memo. My voice didn't shake. My name is Noah Hale. My name is Hale Bradford. Both are mine. I have nothing left to hide. To those who tried to erase me, you didn't lose me. You gave me away, and I just took myself back. I saved the file in the same folder as every other note. The ledger wasn't just paper now, it was voice, image, memory, a living archive. Evan walked in as I was slipping the phone into my pocket. He looked at the tube in my hand and smiled faintly. Still keeping that old thing? Yes, I said. It outlasted a lot. He nodded, as if he understood more than he let on. Then he placed a newly built frame on the work table, a simple oak rectangle, corners joined tight, for your next piece, he said. I rested the cadmium red tube on the table beside the frame, past and future side by side. Outside, snow began to fall, muting the city. Inside, the cottage exhaled, not as a house full of ghosts, but as a gallery of survival.